Hello everyone, and welcome to this DAISY Consortium webinar titled Accessible Publishing Support, a tour of training, tools and resources. Over the next hour, we'll be taking a look at the training, tools and resources that are out there to support people on their journey to accessible publishing. You may be a publisher who's keen to know about the latest information, or perhaps a disability organization that's encouraging the publishing industry in your country. Having reached the decision to publish accessible content, the questions then come. Where do I start? What specifically do I do? How can I check I'm doing this right? Well, we've got you covered with our speakers today. So at this point, I'll ask them to introduce themselves.
Hi everyone, I'm Elisa Molinari, Project Manager at Fondazione LIA Libri Italiani Accessibili, which is the Italian translation of Italian accessible books. We are an Italian not-for-profit organization set up by the Italian Publisher Association in collaboration with the Italian Blind Union, and we work to promote accessibility in the publishing field.
Hi, my name is Hans Berends. I'm an accessibility officer at Dedicon in the Netherlands. We're a non-profit organization and we produce learning and reading materials in accessible formats. And we're involved in a number of national and international projects.
And my name is Richard Orme. I work at the DAISY Consortium, a global non-profit organization. And our expert team and our members, such as Fondazione LIA and Dedicon, we work on innovative and impactful initiatives to further our mission and to develop global solutions for accessible publishing and reading. So, what are we going to cover in today's session? Well, we're going to begin with getting a bit of a flavor about the range of training, tools, and resources that are out there. It's not going to be an exhaustive list, but we'll give you a sense of the different range of resources and we'll take a look and a peek at a couple of them. And then we'll hear from Italy and from the Netherlands in the segments we've called the Italian Job and What's Cooking in the Dutch Oven. And the purpose of these two segments are to understand the journey that these two organizations have been on in supporting the publishing industry in their countries and beyond. And then we'll conclude with a question and answer session and some discussion. So if you think of questions, feel free to add them into the Q&A section at any time. Now, often on these webinars, people want to be able to have access to the links. So as I mentioned in the housekeeping, the slide deck will become available to you in the next few days. But if you're desperate to get hold of the resources, you can head along to daisy.org/WR, that stands for Webinar Resources, where we'll be doing a live update of the links that we're talking about. Okay, let's head into the session then. And the first item is really around training, talking about the range of training resources that are around there to support you. And one obvious one to mention are webinars just such as this one. And because we've archived all the webinars we've done with expert speakers from all around the world on an amazing variety of topics, just to remind you that we have more than 35 hours of goodness at daisy.org webinars. With each of the webinars we've done, we create an edited version of the session. We produce a transcript, the slide deck is available, and an article with the most important links pulled out from it. There's lots of material there that you can go and browse through. Thinking of more structured training, of course, these days there's a wealth of material available on online courses. And one I want to point you to just at the beginning is the courses available at W3C on their digital accessibility basics. There's a course here which is around 18 to 20 hours to complete. It's free for you to complete and covers all aspects of digital accessibility and is intended to be relevant to a whole range of different audiences, including coders, developers, those who are working in the disability advocacy space and beyond. It's a great range of quite wide-ranging resources. They're free to take. And if you want a certificate to add into your curriculum vitae or resume, that is also available to you at a price of $99. And then thinking of some more tool-specific learning, there's courses available on LinkedIn Learning. And what I particularly want to highlight, because we get asked about this a lot, is the course by Laura from Canada called EPUB Accessibility Using InDesign. Now, this is a priced course. It's around $30. But it's a brilliant course, lots of very specific training in there, and it scores 4.9 stars out of 5. As I mentioned, we get asked about InDesign a lot. I'm sure we'll hear about other InDesign resources from our two speakers too. Another topic that comes up a great deal is image descriptions. And one I want to pull out is the Poet training tool over at the diagram site. And this is one maybe we can take a look at that quickly. So if I can make my browser work, I need to drag it over to the right screen. This is the Poet training tool site, which is a Benetech initiative. And if I move to how to describe images, there's lots of guidelines and training here to help you understand how to write good alt text. So if we start with this first one, they give you an example. They'll provide you with an image and they provide some context and then some guidelines to support how you would write good alt text with that. And then for each of these examples, there's a little where you can test your understanding because it gives you 3 examples of possible alt text. And then we can pick one of those examples and then move to next. And in this case, I've picked the wrong one. It tells me why I've made that bad choice and what I should choose instead. So working through this extensive range of image descriptions that are on this site will really help someone who's starting out with writing image descriptions, or who wants to go to specific types of images, and they cover all ranges from STEM materials, art materials, as well as simple images. And you'll be able to get some advice on how to produce alt text for the site that you're working on, or the publications. Also, we're going to hear about some specific training that's e-learning from Hans, which is called Inclusive Publishing in Practice. And also recently launched in Canada is the Accessible Publishing Learning Network. This is a great resource of themed articles with videos, and there's also backed up with a kind of a community of people to answer questions as well. So when you get to look at this deck and follow up these resources, do take a look at this newly published set of resources within the scope of what they're doing in Canada. They're doing amazing work there. Lots of book shows like the Frankfurt Book Fair, the London Book Fair, and possibly in the countries where you are, they might be hosting conferences on accessible publishing. It's such a big topic now. And indeed, you might have seminars on accessible publishing as part of accessibility conferences. So take a look at the accessibility conferences and the book fairs. These are great places to go along and hear from speakers in your part of the world. And often they're possible to join them virtually as well. And we'll hear no doubt about some bespoke training that's available in the Netherlands and Italy, and think about whether that's relevant to you in your countries as well. So in terms of the kind of more formal training, here are some examples that we picked up. But in addition to the training, there are tools there to support people on the journey to accessible publishing. And let's take a look at some that we've highlighted for you. So within tools, it might be in your production tool, there's a built-in accessibility checker. One where we hear many manuscripts start their journey towards a publication is in Microsoft Word. And of course, note that within Microsoft Word, there is that accessibility checker that's become more capable and more easy to use because it's right there at the top of the ribbon in the latest versions. And we find that in terms of people learning the fundamental principles of accessible publishing, like structure, semantic markup, image descriptions, creating proper tables, these sorts of things, the basics are pretty much there in Word. And so we shouldn't overlook the tool that's so widely used using that accessibility checker is a great way for people to learn those kind of key accessibility principles. And there are validators and checkers that are useful because they help you check your the content that you're producing. But of course, when you have mistakes, it'll flag up errors, and that's when you really are starting to learn. So the PDF accessibility checker pack was released as a new version last year, pack 2021. It's a free accessibility checker for PDF, available for Windows. And within Adobe Acrobat, the authoring tool or remediation tool, that has its own accessibility checker, of course. That's a price product. So you've got a couple of different options there if you're working in the PDF space. If you're working in EPUB, there's maybe a wider range of free tools available to you, starting, of course, with EPUB Check. A principle of producing accessible publications is making sure, first of all, that it's a valid publication. So EPUB Check will make sure that you've got a valid EPUB. And then ACE by Daisy is the tool that you can use to do automated accessibility checking within your publication once you've created your EPUB. Now, ACE and ACE Smart, which is one I'll show you at the moment, we think these are great learning tools because within them, when it flags up issues, there's a link straight through to the DAISY Accessible Publishing knowledge base, where there are code snippets, links to the standards and explanatory text. And so learning by doing, using these tools is a brilliant way to learn more about accessible publishing and link that to the standards. ACE Smart is available at smart.daisy.org, and we'll take a little look at that now. The way that ACE Smart works is that you first of all would run your EPUB through ACE, and then it creates a file with a JSON file, which you can then load into ACE Smart. Or you can start just manually in ACE Smart itself. So here I've loaded up a publication and it's populated a number of the different fields for me. And then we have a number of tabs here. The first one I'll go to is conformance. So right now I'm looking to conform with EPUB Accessibility 1.0. I'm going to switch that to 1.1. You can configure the kind of testing you're going to do. And the purpose of Smart is to guide you through the manual testing. So ACE itself will do the automated testing, and ACE Smart is there to guide you through the testing that a human needs to work through. And the training potential behind this and the learning potential is that it explains each of these criteria, and there are links through to the knowledge base to be able to help you with that. And then within ACE Smart, you're able to complete whether or not that particular test has passed. You can add a note and then use that to generate a report as well, which is then consistent between the different tests that you've done. So in and of itself, it's a testing tool, but you learn a lot through using that. And then lastly, I want to mention that other tools that you'll want to use to help you in your understanding of accessible publishing and whether or not you're getting there is the importance of testing within reading apps together with assistive technologies. So, you should be thinking about the tools such as the reading systems and using them in combination with magnification products, with screen readers, with dyslexia tools, because it's really important to make sure you're doing that manual checking as well. And lastly, then some resources, and we've got lots of these listed in the downloadable document and in the slide deck that we'll be embellishing. But DAISY itself, funded by a Google grant, launched the Inclusiefpublishering.org website. And this is intended to be a hub. So you'll find lots of links in there, and indeed a dedicated section all on resources. And on that website, you can also sign up to receive the newsletter with news about inclusive publishing. If you're working in EPUB 3, then another resource to help you along the way is Accessible EPUB 3 by Matt Garish and the Accessible Publishing Knowledge Base that I've mentioned already. And you may well have a stakeholder platform in your country. If so, you should be tapping into that. And by this, I mean a group of organizations that are working together. They could be publishers, they could be government agencies, disability organizations, and so on, that are working together to look towards successful implementation of, for example, the European Accessibility Act. The Accessible Publishing Learning Network is the example that I gave earlier of the resources that are put together within Canada. These examples increasingly exist in different countries. Also turn to the DAISY member organizations in your countries if you're a publisher. Organizations who are producing specialist libraries for people with print disabilities have for many years been producing accessible publications. They have a wealth of expertise about how to adapt certain publications and also on the needs of persons with print disabilities. So it's important that they're part of this conversation, as indeed it's important that persons with print disabilities themselves. These are great resources for people who are embarking on accessible publishing. The end users need to be involved in this journey. It's also about the reading systems. This is really important because we talk about this accessible publishing ecosystem. And over at epubtest.org, you'll find a whole set of tests that can be conducted with reading systems to check that they have the features that people with print disabilities demand. And you can also see the test results for many, many reading systems that have been tested. And you can see how they, the features that they offer for people with low vision, with dyslexia, or who are using a screen reader. And then lastly, in terms of resources, I want to mention publishing at W3C. This is the group within the W3C community that is looking after publishing standards and specifications. It's free to join the community groups, or you can sign up as a member of W3C and really get down and dirty with the development of the standards. Now, this would be a really boring webinar if all we were doing was going through different websites and resources. So I think the way to bring this really to life is to hear the stories of the journeys in different countries as they've understood the needs of the publishing industry and the missing pieces, and then they've looked to support the publishing industry on that journey. So let's now learn from Italy and hear how the Italian job is moving along. So over to you, Elisa.
Thank you very much, Richard, also for a chance to walk down memory lane in regard to the work done in the accessibility field in Italy. So first of all, let me start by saying that we started to work in this area back in 2011, and back then the word accessibility was not as common as it is today, especially in regard to digital publication. In this context, we had a very clear idea, a very strict principle we wanted to follow, which is that we knew that it was possible to incorporate accessibility into mainstream digital production and distribution channels. So that principle still guides LIA's activity. We knew back then that the standard was there. I'm speaking about the EPUB format. The technology was there. The software was there. It was really a matter of making all this work together. So that's when we started to work with Italian publishers. So the first goal that we had as LIA was really a concrete one, and it allowed us to develop different resources and activities I'm going to talk to you in a moment. And the goal that we had back then was to create an online catalog of born accessible publication, what we like to call the LIA catalog. It's in Italian, and it features now 30,000 ebooks. The very first goal was to achieve just 3,000 accessible books. It's the fruit of a collaboration of LIA and 76 publishing imprints of fiction and non-fiction in Italy. And one thing that I could talk a couple of days about the LIA catalog, but it will take me just a couple of more minutes. And what I'd like to stress here is the fact that of both 76 publishing imprints, we are glad to have on board both very big publishing houses and medium-sized, as well as small and sometimes very, very small family-owned publishing houses, showing that it is possible for every publisher to produce for an accessible publication if they acquire the knowledge and the resources to do so. So training is crucial in this area. So as soon as the goal of 3,000 EPUB was achieved, we realized that we needed as LIA, but overall as publishing community, to achieve such a wider goal, which is to create an accessible ecosystem, which is accessible to everyone, as Richard already anticipated. So we tried to develop activities in order to address all the different parts of ecosystem. So it was important for us to work with those who produce ebook and metadata, to the distributors, to the ones who manage the purchase and loan system, devices, and reading apps. So it's really a community effort to work so that everyone can have the very same reading opportunities. So what about in practical, which are the activities I'd like to talk you today? So how did we make it work? First of all, we started with awareness raising events, especially in the very first part of our journey. They played a huge role in that. So we patented a format called Reading in the Dark, where we involve authors reading alongside blind and partially sighted readers, the very same ebook, showing which are the benefits for everyone if an ebook is accessible. So this was for us a very good way to speak to a wider audience about accessibility. Second of all, accessibility certification and conversion. So we set up a program which allows us to certify ebooks produced by publishers title by title and take care of conversions on their behalf if needed. Consultancy plays a huge part on that. Publishers are really different, the one from another. Trade publishers have needs which may vary from the needs of an educational publishers. So it's important, for example, to have strategic consultancy, work on the ideation of workflows that take accessibility into consideration. You may need audit of publication platforms and apps. So for sure, this is a huge part. And for sure, last but not least, training. Training has always been crucial. Over the years, we think we train more than over 1,000 professionals in Italy and worldwide, especially in those three topics, which is InDesign for sure. So how to make the most out of InDesign for accessibility, how to produce accessible documents, starting from Word, for example, and how to create effective alternative description for the images. So, and in these training courses, what we feel is really important is to have very practical sessions so that it's possible to work on something that publishers are already working on. So those are some of the activities that we have in place. Another thing I'd like to address before I speak about a couple of resources I hope you may find useful is the fact that we feel that we need everyone on board when we speak about accessibility. So you'll find many different resources targeted to different persons within the very same company. So it's important to have on board executives who can foster the adoption of accessibility, the editorial department, so the persons who take care of the publication, alternative description, web developers, so the persons who develop sites, apps, and digital properties, and also communication and customer service team. They are the persons who talk to your customers, so please involve them. When we started 10 years ago, what we noticed that usually accessibility was always thought as a responsibility just of the technological department. So what we try to explain as often as we can is that real accessibility is a value of all the company. So it's really important to have everyone on board. So moving on, speaking of concrete resources, today I'd like to show you a couple of free resources you can find on our website. And I'll start with one which was born out of our training sessions. It's a board on Trello called Tools for Born Accessible Publishing. And it was born because after training courses, we received a lot of questions about how can I keep updated with the software, the tools, and the topics that you talked about. So we built this board, which is divided into some categories, for example, specs, specification and documents, standalone tools, Adobe InDesign, Microsoft Word, and so on. And for each of these categories, you can find tools and resources that have been tested by Fondazione Lia, are tools that we suggest during our training courses. So, and we have developed also some tags to identify the different characteristic. Etichette is the Italian word for tags. So for example, if you're interested in EPUB, you can have an idea just of the EPUB resources, or PowerPoint, PDF, metadata. You can see, browse which are the free resources or the ones you need to pay something for. And if I open one of the cards, for example, this is equal to EPUB developed by the DAISY Consortium, you will find a short description of what this resource is, a link to it, and a link to the communication website. One thing that has been really useful in the past years is that for sure we test every resource that you can see on this board, but we're really glad if someone is using a tool and is willing to share it with us. So it's possible to send a message to Fondazione Lia highlighting a tool, a resource, something that is working, for example, new plugins or other apps and softwares, and we will be glad to test it and to eventually feature it in our Trello board. The second resource that I'd like to talk briefly about is something that we developed a couple of years ago. As you may know, in 2025, the European Accessibility Act is coming into force in Europe and for all those parties that are operating in Europe. So we developed, we published a white paper called eBooks for All, available in EPUB and in PDF, where we try to cover what the European Accessibility Act is about, and especially which is the role that every player in the accessible ecosystem needs to play in order to be compliant. So there's a legislative framework and then more technical information about the things that you need to follow to be in line with that. So that said, I hope I provided you with a nice overview of what's happening in Italy, and I'm glad to hand it over to Hans to listen what's cooking in the Netherlands.
Thank you, Elisa. And thank you, Richard, Data Consortium, for inviting me. Well, in the Netherlands, our journey really started in 2016. In that year, Dedicon initiated a roundtable, and shared mission was, and still is, to bring about change and support the transition towards born accessible publishing. Now, stakeholders are, among others, the Dutch Publishers Association, interest groups for people with a reading impairment, special education organizations for the visually impaired, the Royal Library, the Ministry of Education, Culture and Science, and Dedicon. Now, an accessibility working group was created, and publishers in this working group asked for a list of 10 quick wins so they can make a start. This resulted in a quick guide, a booklet titled Maak Open, which could be translated into Open Up. It's published in print and available in accessible PDF. It has 10 easy to implement guidelines and best practices, as well as a brief introduction to raise awareness. And it aims to make accessibility more accessible and understandable. The booklet proved to be very popular and a good starting point if you're a novice. Now, the roundtable also resulted in 2 born accessible publishing projects. They are co-funded by the ministry and roundtable stakeholders. The projects developed training programs for educational and trade publishers. Guided tuition took place in face-to-face and later online workshops, and all workshops included many practical exercises. In 2018-2019, the first project, professionals from 22 publishing organizations participated in 4 different workshops. Also, in-company discussions and trainings were held at 10 organizations. The second project, which is held in 2021 until 2022, it aimed to build knowledge and skills. And the online workshops that were developed involved the expertise of 7 trainers. And they will be held on 52 occasions, that is, by the end of the year. And so far have been attended by some 90 professionals working at 65 publishing organizations. During the projects, the first quick guide was followed by 3 more. One focusing on text layout, the third one on how to quickly check accessibility. That's why it's called Check This. And the last one focuses on design principles and involving persons with an impairment. They're only available in Dutch. Later on, a very basic website was launched called Inclusiefpubliceren.nl. Main purpose at that time was to offer downloads of the quick guides and list valuable resources. Over the years, the website developed into a knowledge base with the presentations and documents created for the workshops, with downloads, articles, frequently asked questions, and Ask the Expert, a help desk, if you like. Publishing professionals are invited to send their questions about born accessible publishing. Inclusiefpubliceren was recently redesigned, redeveloped. On the 15th of September, it was launched. On that same day, the learning platform Inclusive Publishing in Practice was formally launched, and it's embedded in Inclusiefpubliceren.nl by linking to the specific IPIP learning modules. Now, Inclusive Publishing in Practice, this needs some further explanation. Dedicon was a partner in a European project. Other partners were Johannes Kepler Universität from Austria and BrailleNet from France. And the aim was and is to support the transition towards inclusive publishing by raising awareness and providing practical and interactive learning materials that help create born accessible publications. The platform also aims to provide stepping stones to more in-depth and detailed resources, for example, WCAG and EPUB accessibility. Inclusive Publishing in Practice, in brief IPIP, is the first detailed cross-sector and multilingual training resource. Focus is on all aspects of implementing born accessible publications. It's open source under a Creative Commons license, and content is available in English, French, German, and Dutch. The e-learning materials are all practical and interactive, and content is as technology agnostic as much as possible. If we take a closer look at the course design, then we find that there are 4 learning paths following steps in the digital publication lifecycle, namely the publishing business, content creation, design, production, and development. And the IPIP learning materials are organized in 11 courses, 30 modules, and 75 learning units. Taking a closer look at all courses and modules, we can see that there are quite a number. The learning path publishing business has courses called Inclusive Publishing Context with a number of modules, accessibility, conformance, and metadata. The content creation learning path has courses on images and text alternatives and multimedia. The learning path design focuses on color and layout, whereas the production and development learning path has courses called structure, formats and languages, navigation, and production tools. Now, taking a brief look at the homepage, this is where the homepage is. Let me quickly guide you through some screenshots of the platform just to give you an idea. So starting at the homepage, you can navigate to a learning path, for example, content creation. And on the homepage is also a list of courses and modules. For example, you can also navigate to the course images and text alternatives, or you go straight to the module image description. Once you're on the landing page, you can select a learning unit of this particular module. In this case, there are 4 modules. Learning units. The learning outcomes can help you to decide. For example, we pick users and experiences. Coming to the landing page of users and experiences, this is where you get information in an overview, and you can start this particular unit. Once you've started the unit, each learning unit consists of practice, theory, assessment, activity, and references. In practice, you determine what you already know. In theory, you read and learn about the topic. In assessment, you evaluate what you've learned. And in activity, you put everything you've learned into practice. And finally, in references, you can consult resources and find related learning materials on the platform. Now, the learning platform is designed for different learning methods. Self-paced individual learning, you can learn in your own time, at your own pace, or scheduled collaborative learning, for example, together with 1 or more colleagues. Learning on the job, activities are added to the learning units to facilitate this. By using your own digital publications, you can transfer knowledge and bring it into practice. And finally, blended learning, by combining online or learning with face-to-face sessions with or without guided tuition. So to sum up, in the Netherlands, we like to think we support publishers by providing them with some good ingredients so they can raise awareness, build knowledge and skills step by step in all of the different learning stages. So the awareness sessions and quick guides are a good place to start if you're a novice. And the workshops we provided with guided tuition can bring you to an intermediate level, and the resources on Inclusiefpubliceren will help you do so as well. And finally, Inclusive Publishing in Practice, the e-learning platform, helps you become an expert and also be able to use other valuable resources out there, like WCAG and IPIP accessibility. So, thank you. I hope you have a good idea about the journey in the Netherlands, and I would like to invite you to use Inclusive Publishing in Practice. Thank you.
Well, that's the end of the presentations, and thank you, Elisa and Hans, for describing so well the journey that you've taken in your countries to direct people in the publishing industry. We've heard about useful training, tools, and resources. Well, you've covered a lot of ground there, and now I'd like to invite our audience to ask any questions or to make any comments. You could be clarifying something or exploring a topic in more detail. So keep your questions coming in and we'll cover as many as we can in the remaining time. I noticed, Hans, first question to you, that you talked about resources in the Dutch language. This is kind of an obvious question. Many different languages used across Europe and the world. What about localizing these resources? What are the possibilities for people taking resources and adapting them for their own languages and their own situations? Hans, maybe you could speak to that first, and Lisa, maybe you have comments too.
Yeah, certainly. Well, if it comes to the quick guides, it would be great if they could be translated into, let's say, English, but they are only available in Dutch so far. And of course, we're open to that. When it comes to the Inclusive Publishing in Practice platform, it is multilingual. Like I said, it's in English, French, German, and Dutch. But it would be great if it could be translated into some other languages as well. And when it comes to the resources we created during the workshops for the guided tuition, they're available in Dutch only, as you said. But if anyone would wish to localize it and have it translated into its local language, please contact us. Yeah.
So before I turn to you, Lisa, Eva is asking the question. So what are the 10 starting points in Mark Oven? I guess let's turn that into a very practical thing. If someone wanted to translate that into English or to French, what are the steps for that? And we probably don't have a chance to go through and translate it live, but is it possible to take those Dutch starting guides and convert them? And how would someone do that, Hans?
They're available as a Word document. They could be translated, but since it would be great if there would be some editorial, guidance, because as I've explained, the quick guides were written with a specific purpose. So it would be easy to translate them starting with the Word document and then discuss if the message still comes across.
Great. And that's a conversation with yourself, is it, Hans?
I'm sorry, I didn't get that.
And that would be a conversation with yourself, would it be, to check that? Yeah, perfect.
Sure,
wonderful. So Elisa, what about this question then? Lots of resources in different languages. What about, what are the opportunities for extending them into other languages?
Yes, so as for our resources, for sure they are born in Italian, but most of them are already available in English. So for example, our website is available in both in Italian and in English. As for the resources that we cover today, the Trello board is in English, and as for the white paper, it has been published in English and it has already been translated into Japanese and German. And in this very week, it has been published also in Lithuanian. So if this is something you're interested in translating the white paper or other resources, please drop us a line and we will be glad to collaborate on that.
Well, that's great. I mean, positive answers from both of you. I think this is how our community can support each other, by not reinventing the wheel, but having our resources that are open, available for translation. That point you made, Hans, about a little bit of kind of checking on the editorial side of things is a good step, but that's our community working together to support accessible publishing. That's great. Well, the next question I think is also to both of you. Thank you for sharing your journeys of where you've come to so far. The question is, what next? What is the job done? And if not, what are you planning to achieve next? So Elisa, let's start with you.
Well, the job is not done yet, for sure. So we have many things cooking in Italy, if I can steal the metaphor from Hans. For sure, we're launching next year a new set of training courses online in English. So this, we hope that this could be another occasion to work on the topics that we discussed before. And I'd like to highlight another project we are working on. We are, I think, in the first part of next year, we are publishing a new manual, this time on how to use InDesign for accessibility. So these are the two main projects we would like to cover in terms of resources for the next year.
Great. I'm sure that will be popular, and I know it's highly in demand. Hans, what's coming next for you and your colleagues at Dedicon?
Well, yes, the stakeholders of the roundtable, Dedicon is one of them, as I told, are considering follow-up Born Accessible publishing projects in the Netherlands. It's not certain what these projects will be at this point. The steering group of Inclusive Publishing in Practice is thinking along the same line, and hopefully we can do some projects next year. And Dedicon, as always, is involved in national and international projects, and I'm sure that there will be some very interesting resources coming from that. We'll be doing a number of projects on accessibility metadata, and we intend to do pilots with publishers. So I'm sure that that will leave us with some very interesting resources in the future.
Very good. And if I may be slightly, I could steal some time to mention what's coming up next for DAISY. Well, as people will know, over the years, we've published materials on our website, and we've produced lots of webinar resources, as I've mentioned. Hans, you explained so well the concept of self-study materials, self-paced learning, and also the blended learning. And this is an approach that we're really embracing within the DAISY consortium. Right now, we have launched a course that it was commissioned by the Accessible Book Consortium on accessible publishing concepts. This was actually something that when we went to stakeholders in the publishing industry and asked them about what they would consider to be the highest priority, they said they wanted things to just help people understand what accessible publishing was, who people with print disabilities were, and how to get started. So we produced that course. It's now available in English at learning.daisy.org. And what's coming next for us is to try and address that languages question. So in the coming weeks, this will become available in Spanish and in French. In due course, will be available in Arabic too. And I guess that, openness is there too. If folk want to work with us to localize courses like this into other languages, that's how we can work together. So Accessible Publishing Concepts is just a short course of 2 to 3 hours. We've already had some 19 publishers from Africa go through it, and they're giving us some great feedback. So we see the role of an easy-to-use learning platform will really help people with that bite-sized learning kind of approach, which can also be blended too. So looking for some more questions, we have one here, which is, so along this journey, we've talked about training and learning available for the publishing industry. What are the key takeaway learnings that you would share with maybe sister organizations in other countries that are looking to put together these resources for stakeholders in the publishing industry? So these are, I guess, your organizational learnings that you've learned along the way. So again, coming to you, Elisa, what are the learnings in terms of trying to run projects like this to have the highest impact? I
liked a lot your idea of not reinventing the wheel. I mean, I think we witnessed today a lot of great resources available. So I think that collaboration, where is possible, is key. We are all working towards the very same direction. So if a resource is available, the idea of translation, I think it's really a good one. So again, not translate the wheel, but focus our efforts of publishing community towards the same goal. I think this is the best thing that we can do to achieve greater goals together.
Thank you. Nice one. And Hans, well, you described a whole range of different projects over multiple years. What are the learnings you would share with sister organizations?
Two, I guess. Work together. In the Netherlands, there's a really important role played by the Dutch Publishers Association, which was absolutely great. And the other one is make accessibility accessible and understandable, so anyone can start, and thereby create momentum and keep the momentum by taking it step by step, give publishers and professionals enough time to process all the new information and put it into practice. That is, I guess, what would be the most important lesson learned from our journey.
Thank you. And the lesson I think I would note from listening to both of you and reflecting is that this isn't something that just happens overnight. You've both described many years of work, and it's not complete yet. So don't feel that everything has to be solved in one go. I've just learned that starting that journey or continuing on that journey is an important thing. And as you've both said, learn from others. We have one more question in the queue here. I think it's a bit of a tricky one that, so maybe you can help me, which is what's the latest position about resources using InDesign? So I think it's difficult in that it could be a complex answer in that you've heard me talk about the fact that we have DAISY webinars, where there are webinars in there that cover InDesign. I mentioned Laura Brady's course, which is on LinkedIn Learning. Elisa, do you have materials about InDesign training, or is that something you offer as a custom course from Leah?
Yeah, right now it's a custom course for Fondazione Lia, and we're launching a course in English next semester, as well as a guide, since this is for sure a topic that has been asked to us to address a lot of times in the past months. So for sure it's something that we will work on in the next months.
And Hans, within the Inclusive Publishing in Practice, I guess you talked about it being format and tool agnostic. Someone who's looking to improve the output from InDesign, would they have some specific things within IPIP, or is it not at that level?
No, you're right. There's a learning unit about the implementation using InDesign. And in the Netherlands, we'll be doing an extra workshop about EPUB and InDesign for EPUB producers. That's within the project we're doing at this moment. So
I hope that partly addresses, Roger, your question. I guess there are like so many of the things we would have talked about, such as image descriptions and EPUB specifications, PDF accessibility, and so on. There's actually a range of different resources out there, and hopefully some of the country websites with the stakeholder platforms, the resources like Inclusive Publishing and others, they'll point people to these range of resources, and they can take what is useful to them, whether that's webinars, specific documents, or whatever. Okay, so I think we've worked through the questions we had in the Q&A queue, and we're coming to the end of this session. Once again, a big thank you to Elisa and Hans for sharing their expertise. These accessible publishing and reading webinars, they're brought to you by the DAISY Consortium, a global non-profit organization, and the expert team at DAISY and members such as Fondazione Lia and Dedicon work on innovative and impactful initiatives to further the mission to developing global solutions for accessible publishing and reading. Before we close, I want to tell you about the next webinar DAISY will be offering. In 2 weeks' time, on the 12th of October, we'll learn about lessons learned in the journey to accessible publishing. If you encounter a challenge on the road to accessible publishing, chances are that you're not the first. In this session, we'll reveal the issues that arise again and again and hear how they're being addressed by companies as they get ready for the European Accessibility Act. If you have ideas for other webinar topics in the area of accessible reading and publishing, including any that you might like to contribute to, we'd love to hear from you. But that's it for this session. I hope you'll join us again soon. In the meantime, thank you for your time. Stay safe and well, and have a wonderful rest of your day. Goodbye.